fellow Toastmasters.
Morning.
Mr. Would someone
President.
like to do, good morning, would someone like to do an invocation this morning?
No Charlie?
No.
Don't mumble, Steve.
Anybody?
Okay, I will.
Okay, Carol.
Well, as we start this day and a new presidential administration, let's hope that the COVID problem is solved this year and that 2021 will just be a better year for everyone. And we're always thankful for our Toastmaster group. Amen.
Amen. All right. Now for the pledge, I want everybody to mute their mics. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Carol, for stepping in for the invocation. Good morning, fellow Toastmasters. Good to see you all this morning. Before I turn for announcements, we would like to wish our immediate past president a very happy birthday. His birthday was yesterday, so happy birthday to Larry McKenzie. Are there any announcements from the floor this morning?
Come and join us for the Star Show on Saturday night, 6 o'clock here at the Manor.
Thank you very much, Margot. After the meeting, there'll be a club officer meeting for club officers, so stick around for after the meeting. February 6th is the Area 11 contest. It starts at 9 a.m. and I was told that Area 11 will be combining the contest with Area 14. So we are looking forward to a very wonderful speech contest.
And they are still looking for judges and other roles. If you are interested, let me know or John Belomo directly, please. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Kate. Are there any other announcements from the floor? All right, well, without further ado, I will turn the meeting proceedings over to our Toastmaster of the day, Steve Smith.
Thank you. If you haven't already figured this out, we're going to talk about the winter night sky today. And what this is going to be is a glorified pitch for our star show Saturday night that I hope we can get in, but that is totally beyond my control. That's up to the weather. Because first thing you'll notice when you go outside this time of year is that it's not June. It's kind of cold out there and we got a lot more clouds. But if it's clear, it's worth going outside to have a look up. There's a lot of things you can only see this time of the year. And I'll be talking about a few of those as the meeting progresses. But let's get into some of the roles of the day. Now, Word Master is a great one to start with. Now, Anne Marie had signed up for it, but then she called me last night and said she could not do this. But she did send along a word. So if I can get a volunteer to work with this, she sent along the word constellation. That looks like it's reversed. Well, it isn't mine.
Dr. Stevens is volunteering.
Okay. The word is constellation, a group or cluster of related things. And Dr. Stevens could do that. I'd really appreciate that. Let's see. We're okay.
Please try to use that in every form of speaking you use today. And I will tally that and present it in the meeting. Constellation.
Okay. Now the Master today is Mike Licata. Can you tell us what you'll be doing?
Good morning, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our guests this morning. My job as the odd master this morning will be count the odds, the pregnant pauses, and report back at the end of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our grammarian today is Marty Johnson. Can you tell us what you'll be doing? I thought I saw him on there. Marty?
Yes, thank you, Steve. I didn't hear you call me. Good morning, everyone, fellow Toastmasters, and I do not see any guests. This morning is grammarian. I'll be carefully testing my own listening skills and recording any good uses or excellent uses of grammar and grammar that may need a little tweaking per se. And hopefully I'll hear some grammar that's in a constellation of sorts. And I'll report at the end of the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. Let's see what's next here. Our quote master today is Morklees. Do you have a quote for us? Is he there?
Yes, I do.
Ah.
When you look up at the sky, you may find yourself wondering what's beyond. For thousands of years, people have connected to the galaxy to understand agriculture, navigation, time, and even finding matches made in heaven. My quote today is, "Look at the sky. We are not alone. The whole universe is friendly to us and conspires only to give the best to those who dream and work." By 11th President of India, Mr. Abul Kalam. He was also an aerospace engineer, thus he got the Hoover Medal from the American Engineering Societies, of which I was a member. That is the quote today from Mr. Kalam. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. Next up is our jester, Len Thornton. Do you have something funny to say? Len, I think you're muted.
Okay, I'll try it that way. I was trying the space bar. That wasn't working too well. Okay, let's see here. Two Canadians are sitting outside watching the night sky. When the first guy asks the other, "If you had to be one star in the night sky, which one would you be, eh?" The second guy thinks for a moment and says, "I'd probably be the brightest star in the sky." To which the first guy quickly responds, "You can't be serious, eh?"
Ooh.
Two drunks were drinking on the roof of their trailer late one night in Texas. The first drunk looks up at this night sky and says to the other, "The moon is so big, I've been wondering, what do you think is closer, the moon or Florida?" The second drunk gives his friend an amused look. "You can't be serious," he slurs. The first drunk looks back at his friend in confused anticipation. "Well, yes." The second drunk then rolls his eyes and laughs. "Well, think about it. Can you see Florida from here?"
Ah.
And one more. One night, I lie awake in my bed, staring at the night sky, and I ask myself, where the hell's my roof? Mr. Toastmaster.
Brutal.
Thank you. Now, next up is the timer. Now, Ryan Floor is supposed to be the timer, and he didn't respond. Is he here today or not? If he is not, we need a volunteer.
I can do that, Mr. Toastmaster.
Who said that?
Larry
Len.
also said he could. Larry and Len, it will be a battle again.
Well, I heard Len first.
Yeah, we'll fight it out. Larry wasn't able to unmute himself quick enough.
Yeah, so now he's up for table topics.
Uh-huh.
Shaking his head, no. Yeah.
Okay, so what are you gonna do? Glenn, if you're gonna be the timer, tell us about it.
Okay, I'm going to change the background color. And hopefully Larry will parrot my colors there. Speeches are generally 5 to 7 unless I hear different, with a 30-second buffer. Evaluations 2 to 3 minutes with a 30-second buffer. And I always get confused on table topics. I'm sure Mark will tell me, but I know that's a 15-second buffer. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. Next up is our tech and gesture master, which today is Jill, and I know she's here.
I think I am. I'm trying to wake up here. We overslept bad. My job this morning is combination. One that we added since the Zoom, which is Tech Master, which I observe things that people have done that are either good or bad as far as the Zoom meeting aspect. And the other part is the gestures is how they relate to nonverbal communication of their speech. And general speaking, I will report back at the end of the meeting, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. Next up is our quiz master, Beth Fangs. Can you tell us what you'll be doing today?
Good morning, Master Toastmaster. I will be coming up with questions throughout the meeting of different things that people say or do, and asking them at the end of the meeting and make sure everyone was paying close attention. Thank you.
And most importantly, our general evaluator today will be Dave Licata. Can you tell us what you are going to do to me? Today.
Good morning, everyone. It is the duty of the general evaluator to evaluate the Toastmaster of the day and the evaluators. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's all the jobs. So before we launch into table topics, let's take a figurative walk outside this time of year. Now, one good thing about this time of year is the nights are longer, so there's more time to look. The downside is it's cold, you don't feel like staying out there that long. But we'll start with the planets, because that's what a lot of people are interested in, and they're easiest to find. Right now, Mercury is climbing higher and higher in the east, and about the 23rd, conveniently, it'll be at its what we call greatest eastern elongation, as high as it's going to get at this appearance. And it's one of the best appearances of the year. So I'm hoping to find that. It'll be an hour and a half after sunset, so you got to get right on it because it sets soon. Jupiter and Saturn have been great targets for all summer, well into the fall. Unfortunately, right now they're setting inside a half hour when the sun sets. So they're unfortunately out of the picture. Mars had a brilliant opposition back in October, I believe, and it's still a nice target to look at. It's still well placed in the sky. It doesn't set till about 1:30, so there's a lot of time to have a look at that. A lot of people like Venus. Venus is unfortunately a morning star right now. Oh, one other good thing about Mars, and don't make jokes about this, Mars is real close to Uranus right now. Because if we find Mars just a little bit to the left, we're going to see Uranus. Now that's visible to the naked eye, but it's not always real easy to spot. Now it's going to be fairly easy to find. And even in my big telescope, you can make out a little green ball, which tells you you have a planet, not a star. Neptune is even further away, and that'd be right after sunset over in the western part of the sky. But there's always something to look at. The moon is just past first quarter phase right now, so that's not a big factor. It's a fun thing to look at, but it doesn't throw enough light to screw up everything else. So we'll launch into more things, and I think now we'll get into table topics. And what did I do with my dang paper? Here it is. Table topics today is Marc Campos.
Thank you,
Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. Good morning. I love the topic today. I've always been fascinated by astronomy. I've always gazed up at the stars, pondered the mysteries of the heavens. And speaking of mysteries, Len, the time for table topics is 1.5 to 2 minutes with a 15-second buffer, just to clarify that. So our first contestant this morning, as I test your skills speaking extemporaneously, will be Sylvia. Sylvia, I don't believe you have a job today, and you're right there in the middle of my screen, so I locked in on you.
Thank
Our
you.
first question, as you look up at the stars and you ponder all those stars, all those planets, the age-old question, it's a two-part question, however. Are we alone? Actually, three-part question. Are we alone? What are they like? And where the hell are they? Sylvia.
Well, thank you, Mr. Table Topics, Master not going to say picking, choosing me this morning on this three-part question. And it's a really interesting question. We talk about this a lot around our house because my husband says we are not alone. And if you watch any of those sci-fi shows and people, the unknowns that are on sci-fi, he does faithfully, you start to believe, really, maybe we are not alone out here. There must be something else out there. People say they have been abducted, they have come back, and they have a little bit of memory of things, seeing lights and spaceships. And where are they? I wish they would come back and land in my backyard so I could say, okay, you're right or you're wrong, and let this be. But I don't think we will ever see them as of like on the press, as the movies, you know, they're going to come invade us. I don't see that happening, but I've been wrong before. A lot of things have happened in the past that I never thought would happen. And what they look like, they would be interesting to know. Do they look like us? What kind of form? I'm not sure. And, you know, I have 2 pets. They could be aliens, all I know, because the way they act, I really think they've been out there. So I'm going to end this, Mr. Table Topics, and the constellation of these animals, how they act. I did use the word of the day. They are strange, so they could be aliens. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sylvia. Our next contestant this morning, as I look at the screen to Sylvia's right, is Larry Eggert. Larry, nice try. You couldn't escape. And Larry, I have a 2-part question for you as well. So along the lines of stars and space and all that, we're on the cusp of an exciting time in terms of space exploration. Space tourism is really a thing. So the first part of your question is, are you interested in being a space tourist? And the second part is, what would your destination be? Larry Eggert.
Good morning, Mr. Table Topics Master, fellow Toastmasters. Where would my destination be? Well, first of all, I guess it's too early for a 2-part question, but that'll wake me up. Do I want to travel in space? Yes, I do. It's actually one of the things I daydream about often. I think it would be very exciting to travel through space, not knowing that much about it, but certainly would be exciting. What would be my destination? Well, it wouldn't be Uranus, because that's a little too far out. I know Steve was talking about Uranus. Let's see, gazing at the constellation of stars above me, I'd have to say that it would be Mars. And the reason I say that, one of the movies I really enjoy is a movie where an astronaut is left behind on Mars and he learns how to survive. And that always drew me in. I've watched that movie several times. And to be the only person on an entire planet, I think would be pretty exciting to be able to do that. Now, it'd probably be a little bit lonely, certainly a lot of challenges, but to be the first person on Mars. And this particular astronaut, if you watch the movie, he grew crops on Mars and he was able to take equipment that he had to survive, and he eventually launched off the planet. But as I watched that movie, it really struck me that he said every day that he traveled across Mars, he was the only person on an entire planet. So Mars would be my thing if I were able to travel, Mr. Toastmaster, and hopefully in the future we will be visiting Mars. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Larry. The Martian is one of my favorite movies. As well. I really enjoy it. I tried to get my wife to watch it, but she just was so distraught when his crop of potatoes was blown away that she just couldn't handle it and proceed with the movie. So that was that. Now, because I'm a really nice guy, I started off with a 3-part question. We went to a 2-part question, and now we will just have a singular question. But it really requires a creative mind. And I can't think of a more creative mind in AM Lockport than Phil Russell. So Phil, here is your question. Whether you like it or not, I have anointed you a space tourist. And you're on your interstellar journey, you're minding your own business, but you wandered a little too close to a black hole. And unfortunately, you've been sucked into the vortex. Phil, where did you end up when you passed through the black hole? Phil Russell.
At the end. If there is an end. Is there an end? Do we know where it is? As a child, I'd look up into the stars on the beach and we'd look at it and say, how far is that out there? Then, sitting upon the Grand Mesa, as older people, cooking out some chicken on the local firewood, we'd look up and there it was, the evening lights from the north. It was pulsating. How far out is it? When you contemplate, I don't know what a constellation is. When I was younger, I always thought it was just a type of plane. Now I know it's a constellation as a group. But more importantly, how far is infinity? Have you ever thought how far it is out there? Is there an end? I don't know. But when you think about the philosophical thinkings of it, how far is it? A black hole? It's going to take me to the end. No, it isn't, because there is no end. It just keeps going on and on. That's why I enjoy things like Star Wars, Star Trek, all the great sci-fis of the universe, because there's no answer. It just becomes an idea of how far out is it? Is there people out there? Well, let's take a journey in our minds and fly as far as we can to see who's out there and what constellation they are on. Travel to the end. How far is the end? I don't know. Do you know, Mr. Topics Master?
Thank you, Phil. At this point, I would like to call for reports. Len, our time, how did we do?
I'm pleased to report, Mr. Topic Master, that all 3 contestants qualified: Sylvia at 204, Larry at 139, and Phil at 155.
All right, thank you, Len. And I forgot, who's our word master? I completely
Dr.
forgot.
Stevens.
Dr. Stevens, forgive me. How did Constellation do?
I will say that I did my best to listen today, and my head may have been in the constellations, but I did get a few participants here. Marty participated, Mokolos and Larry McKenzie in the chat. And I had Sylvia. I think I had Phil. I'm not sure about Larry Eggert. Did you use the word, Larry? You did? Okay, so they all qualified. Mr. Table Topics Master.
All right, thank you, Dr. Stevens. There you have it. Fellow Toastmasters, please cast your vote for Sylvia, Larry, or Phil. Mr. Toastmaster.
If I could interrupt, Mr. Toastmaster, we have a guest this morning? Linda,
Certainly.
Linda Marie Brown. Linda, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Morning.
Mr. Toastmaster.
Okay. Well, I have a few responses to some of the table topics. We were talking about, or someone was talking about encounters with aliens. I actually did have someone come to one of our star shows and tell this story about an encounter he was convinced he had with an aliens, that they came down into his bedroom and took him away through the roof. Now, it sounds a little far-fetched, but I'm not going to call anybody a liar because I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. One of my fellow astronomers proceeded to rip into this guy and tell him it was impossible. I'm not going to do that. Are you sure there's no life out there? I'm not. And of course, there's the obligatory Uranus jokes. I don't think we've been through a single star show when I haven't had Uranus jokes. Now, as an astronomer, I'll tell you, Uranus jokes are a pain in the butt. Yeah,
It took everybody a little bit.
yeah, I cleaned that up. And someone mentioned the constellations, which was the word of the day. There are 88 named constellations that are recognized by the International Astronomy Union, and they get to make these calls. I don't know all of them. I'm learning, like we all are. There are some constellations that they decided don't exist anymore. They've redefined each area of the sky is mapped off into like a grid. There is the traditional picture that would show, say, Orion as the hunter. If you look at a modern star map, there's actually a area lined out around him. Anything in that area is considered in Orion. Anything in the area next to it is outlined, that is considered in Gemini, which is where I was going to go next. Gemini and Orion are very prominent in the southern sky right now. Now, Orion is big and fairly easy to find. It's got the big red star Betelgeuse in the one corner and the blue supergiant Rigel in the other corner. And it's got the three belt stars that kind of go through at an angle. That makes it fairly easy to find. Almost everybody can find that. Now, if you look at the three stars, go down from about the middle star, you'll see a little blob of light there. Now, that is the most fascinating region out there. That is a nebula. That is what we call M42, Messier Object 42. That is a star-forming region. If you put a telescope on that, you'll see all sorts of clouds, gas clouds. These are star-forming regions. And there's a little structure in there we call a trapezium, which are four stars that just happen to look like a little rectangle. Now you move off to the left of Orion and down. This was mentioned also. You'll see the bright star Sirius in the constellation Canis Major, the big dog. That is the brightest star in the sky. And if you look up and a little further over to the left, there's another, bright star. That is Procyon and Canis Minor, the little dog. These are things you cannot see in the star. That's why I think this is fun to be able to do this time of year. One of my favorite constellations is directly overhead right now, Auriga. That just looks like a big circle of stars. Now, how the ancients saw figures in these things, I don't know. Maybe because it was dark then and they didn't have YouTube to go watch. Maybe they've been drinking too much mead. I don't know, but they saw these figures in there. Now, Auriga has the bright star Cabela in it, which is a big white star, and that makes it easy to find. There are three beautiful star clusters buried in that, M36, 37, and 38. They are what we call open clusters, or we call them salt and pepper clusters, because you put the scope on, it just looks like the sky is just peppered with all these little stars. And they are quite beautiful and very prominent this time of year. Let's get into our speaking program, get some of this out of the way. Now, our first speaker today is Thomas Hellwine, and he's being evaluated by Tracy Farrell. Can you tell us what he's up to today, Tracy?
Thank you, Steve. Yes, I can. Tom's speaking to us today in the humorous path. It's his second speech in that path. It's 5 to 7 minutes. And it's a motivational speech through what he's calling an unmotivated role play. One of the questions, do you have his speech title, Mr. Toastmaster?
I do not.
All right, his speech is 5 to 7 minutes
Right.
and it's entitled By Now. Thomas Helwig, By Now.
Hey, if you're watching this video on YouTube, stick around till the end. Every minute you stay on will save you money. Hi, I'm Thomas. I'm here to tell you about a special offer to my website. Have you ever wanted to get more out of life, have more you time? Well, the key is procrastination and excuses. The way I can do that is you link to my page and you'll get every day more techniques for procrastination and excuses. For some examples, you can talk to some of my coworkers here.
Yeah, I'm the tall guy, and Tom's always good at working on different things. One of the things I like about him is he explains things to me about how the broom handles are too long because he's shorter, and those things on the middle shelf and stuff, he has to like kind of reach up to get those. So I do that for him. He's got a lot of good reasons for why he asked me to do things for him. Those are pretty good. Hey, Joey, what do you think about Thomas? Yeah, so Tom's pretty good. He doesn't get yelled at so much like me. He's always coming around, keeping me company and talking to me all day. You know, I'm like sweeping the floor right now for him right here. You know, it's a pretty good job over here. Hey, boss, what's going on with Thomas? Hey, Joey, put your mask on. So Thomas is a good worker. You know, he's always available and he's always working on something. He tells me all the time he's working on something. So I can't say whatever he's doing. I wish all my workers were always working on things almost done or getting there. Some of the things Daisy doesn't have, he's always working on something, you know? Good worker. So I know what you're saying to yourself. Can this be that good? What happens to my physical ability? Well, one of the great things is your leg muscles will be super strong because you'll be standing around all day long. And then you're thinking, well, what about my upper body? Well, I'm going to show you certain techniques like the lean. So if you want to work on your upper body, you can do the forward lean. And then when you want to work on the opposite muscle group, turn around and do the backward lean. And then when both those muscles start burning, you do the wall lean. That's kind of a neutral position where you get a little bit extra. That's to work through that burn of your legs and arms hurting from all that standing and leaning. So what will you get? Well, you'll get a normal type of GoPro video with me, sometimes edited, most of the times not, of my daily routines, and you can pick up on all the things that I do. Here's just an example. Hey, tall guy, give me that thing off the middle shelf, would you? Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot there, buddy. All right. Hey, Joey. How you coming on that floor? I almost got it all cleaned up for you. There's something that you need to do. The boss wants to talk to you. Oh, here he comes right now. Hey, Joey, put on your mask. All right. So
if you're still here at the end of the video, you can easily, without a lot of effort, just click that buy now button. Don't worry, because if you like this and or click that button, YouTube is already linked to your Facebook, and Facebook already has your PayPal or credit card information. So if you do that, if you're like me and not really bothering to try and separate those things and they all talk to each other, it'll be automatically purchased, and you send you a link to my website with a special access code to be able to see me every day. I appreciate you, and you'll see this message again. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Our second speaker today is Katie Banks, and she's being evaluated by Carol Ann Halstead. So Carol, what's Katie going to talk about?
Katie is working in the negotiate the best outcome. And the purpose of her speech is to share some aspect of a past or future negotiation in her life. Do you have the title?
I do. Katie Banks. Her speech today is the K-Cup Wars. Katie Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster and fellow Toastmasters and our honored, most welcome guest, Linda. Negotiation. The K-Cup Wars? Negotiation. We've all done it, from negotiating a simple plan with family or friends about plans and where to go or what to do, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, like negotiating a raise or buying a new house. Something seemingly simple that you could say I have negotiated on a daily basis is how I choose to drink my coffee, my cup of coffee. And this is how I brew my coffee most days. Today, when I come to my mom's house, she brews a good old-fashioned pot of coffee that we can share for an hour and a half, and I love that. Don't you miss those days sometimes? Well, 25% of Americans have a Keurig or similar single-serve brewer in their homes. Show of hands, who in this Zoom has one? That's about 25% on a quick glance. Thanks, everyone. And even if you aren't a coffee drinker, the machines are used with all hot beverages, teas, hot cocos, ciders. And for this project, I had to research negotiation methods. And this is how I fell down the rabbit hole of an old corporate case that dates back over a decade ago about coffee, of course. The companies involved in that negotiation were Starbucks versus Kraft Heinz. About what exactly? Well, what hit the market over 25 years ago and has never looked back? Of course, the little K-Cup. This is what I'm asking all of you today. I implore you, don't let yourself be a pawn in the K-Cup wars. What does that mean? Okay, let's dive down the rabbit hole together on a coffee adventure. As many of you know, Keurig is a beverage brewing system for home and commercial use. The two flagship Keurig products are the K-Cup pods, which are single-serve coffee containers, and the proprietary machines that brew the pods. Coffee grounds are in each single-serve container consisting of a plastic cup, aluminum lid, and a filter. Each pod is filled with coffee grounds, tea leaves, cocoa powder, fruit powders, is nitrogen flushed, sealed for freshness, and impermeable to oxygen, light, and moisture. Through its partnership licensed brands, Keurig has over 400 varieties and 60 brands of coffee and other beverages. The original single-server brewer and coffee pod manufacturing company, Keurig Incorporated, was founded in Massachusetts back in '92. It launched its first brewers and K-Cup pods targeting the office market in New York City and New England, and brewers for home use were added about 15 years later. In 2006, the publicly traded Vermont-based Green Mountain Coffee Roasters acquired Keurig, and both boomed. Long story shorter, in 2014, Green Mountain Coffee Roasters changed its name to Keurig Green Mountain, and in 2018, Keurig Green Mountain merged with Dr. Pepper Snapple Group in a deal worth $18 billion, creating Keurig Dr. Pepper, a publicly traded conglomerate and one of the largest beverage companies in North America. But back in 2012, something big happened. Keurig's main patent on its K-Cup pods expired. So let's jump back to the case study about negotiation that sparked my curiosity. The dispute between Starbucks and Kraft Heinz dates back another decade before K-Cups even hit the scene, to an agreement negotiated back in '98 when Kraft began selling Starbucks prepackaged coffee through grocery stores. A decade later, by 2010, with sales of its coffee reaching $500 million annually in the grocery stores, Starbucks offered Kraft a buyout to end their negotiated agreement at $750 million. The patent expiration from Keurig was on the horizon, and of course, Starbucks wanted to sell the single-serve pods that were taking off in the market. The company's agreement with Kraft limited Starbucks to selling the pods that worked only in Kraft's machine alternative to Keurig, the Tassimo machines. Kraft, of course, objected to the deal termination, but Starbucks just began to sell their own K-Cups anyhow. And after a 3-year dispute, an arbitrator determined that Starbucks had breached its agreement with Kraft and ordered the coffee maker to pay the food giant $2.75 billion in 2013. Talk about coffee wars. So let's touch back on Keurig while we are talking litigation. Lawsuits by Keurig against others, and quite a constellation of lawsuits by competitors and buyers against Keurig have been rumbling on for years. This past October 2020, Keurig agreed to a $31 million class action settlement to resolve claims that the company monopolized the pod market from 2010 to 2020. But we won't dive into all that today. It could fill another 10 speeches or more. Now, our esteemed club founding member, Dave Licata, where are you? Dave mentions the virtues of the French press very often, and I wholeheartedly agree. In my opinion, the next best thing to a French press is a reusable K-Cup. In our home, we do not purchase disposable K-Cups. I cringe when I see them filling a whole aisle at stores because of the demand. Back 15 years ago, my K-Cup was launched as a refillable, reusable pod, but it was discontinued, of course, because of profits. But consumer backlash prompted the company to announce 5 years ago that it brought back the resealable My Cup. All because some of us pawns fought back. I am so proud of that consumer backlash. It's estimated that there are tens of billions of these in the landfills, and that they could wrap around our planet 10 times. Think of it. Every time you use one of these, you too are contributing to the growing problem of the plastic pollution on our planet. In conclusion, I ask you to ask yourself, why not do your part and make the simple change of using the reusable, refillable K-Cups if you must have a single cup? I implore you to speak with your pocketbook. For only $5, you can have an eco-friendly K-Cup and you can make any coffee you wish. How we drink our coffee is something we all can consider on a personal and professional lives. Whether you bring a reusable pod to work or make some simple changes with your grocery shopping, please join me in your own way and enjoy your coffee even more every day. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. That was interesting. Being an avid coffee drinker, although I've never tried the K-Cups, I found that speech a real eye-opener. Our third speaker today is Jen Czapla, who will be evaluated by Jackie Kenny. Jackie, what is she doing?
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Jen is challenging herself with developing a communication plan today. She hopes to spread positivity in 5 to 7 minutes And she's become a valued member of our constellation here at AM Lockport Toastmasters. Mr. Toastmaster.
I'm afraid I do not have her title.
I do not have it either.
Oh,
Okay,
Okay.
sorry, I thought I chatted both of you, but my title is a failure to communicate.
very appropriate. Okay.
Very appropriate. Yes. Well, fellow Toastmasters, the communication plan. This is a speech that I have been working on for Pathways. And now when I first opened this speech, there are a couple things you should probably know. It wasn't last week or even last month. It was several months ago that I first opened this project, and I have been delaying for about as long as I could, just dragging my feet on it. What's interesting about that, what you may not know about me, is that I'm actually a project manager in my job. What that means is that I develop plans, I outline steps, and I communicate these to audiences. And for some reason, this communication plan project really had me confounded, although it's what I do for a living. I didn't want to spend my time working on this project for work. I feel that I do enough work at work, and I wanted to really focus on something in my personal life because I think of Toastmasters as me time. So outside of that space, in the last 12 months, there haven't been too many people that I'm communicating with on a regular basis. And for the people that I am, you know, my mom, my boyfriend, I don't know that I need a whole plan to deal with that sort of communication. So I started really considering how I could pull this project off. And I realized that as a project manager, I do have some unique skills. I know the benefits of project management, and I know how this can help us achieve our goals. If you've ever had to work with a project manager at your place of employment, you might be having some flashbacks, some negative flashbacks about all those meetings where you go round and round in circles and all of that documentation and all of the sign-offs and those little nitpicky things that happen. But as any good project manager would tell you, all those details, defining the scope, defining the requirements, those are key to actually executing and implementing a project. If we can't meet our milestones without outlining what the expectations are, how we're going to get there, and then clearly communicating those at every step of the way. So in some sense, I think all of us are really project managers. Whether we have employees that we manage or customers that we're working with, whether we have children or significant others, there are people in our lives who we're trying to direct in some way to get to accomplish a goal with us or outside of us. And we have these scripts that we develop for each of our roles. And in those scripts, we often remind one another of what our expectations are, particularly when the people in our lives are failing to meet those expectations. If we're really good, we make sure that we define those expectations first. So you may be wondering where I'm going with this. What does project management have to do with a communication plan? After much deliberation, I decided that I'm going to approach my communication plan as a project manager and use it as a way to achieve my personal goals. Now, it became very clear to me when I did this, there was one particular relationship that I needed to work on. There's one person with whom I rarely have positive and motivational experiences. In this particular role, I follow a more negative script. I think this year, the world has been a minefield of negative rabbit holes. And I have found myself going down those rabbit holes time and time again. It's much easier to express my disappointment than it is to state my goals and expectations clearly. It's much easier to forget to express gratitude when things are accomplished than it is to actually acknowledge those moments in your life. And this has led me to a loop of avoidance and procrastination. But fellow Toastmasters, there is no one that I have to blame but myself, because I am the one that I lack communication with. I am worst at defining my expectations for myself. I am worst at acknowledging the points that I'm meeting my goals. So my primary goal in my communication plan was to bring focus to my life, to hold myself accountable for working toward goals, and to live my life inspired daily. How do I plan to do this? By actually setting up time with myself, purposefully planning how I'm going to achieve these goals, rather than letting the river of life take me down it without any sense of direction myself. I think we're often our own harshest critics, but we also have the power to be our own strongest allies. How do we do that? I don't think there's any better way than to refuse to be an obstacle in your own life, to plan, to be purposeful, to sit down and acknowledge your wins. Now, there are things that are going to change on a daily basis, and that means that we need to set ourselves up for those challenges, adjust regularly. So rather than following the default this year, or this month, or this week, my goal is to have those structures in place in communicating with myself. Thank you, fellow Toastmasters.
Thank you. Can we get a timer's report for our speakers?
Mr. Toastmaster, Thomas spoke for 5 minutes, 17 seconds. He qualified. Kate had a little trouble wrapping up. She was at 7 minutes, 33 seconds. And Jen was within the parameters at 7 minutes, 15 seconds. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. We can go ahead and vote now. Give you a second to do that. Okay. When I left you hanging high up in the sky at Orion, which wasn't very nice of me. Now, if we continue on a little bit more to the north, high up in the northern sky is Perseus. Perseus looks like a straight line of stars, and most of his members are kind of faint. So where they got the fact of Perseus, the hero, standing there, I don't know. But Perseus has a great object in it, or two objects, what we call the double cluster, NGC 869. Now, NGC stands for New General Catalog. That's a list of some 7,000 objects that are interesting to look at that have been cataloged over the years. When I say New General Catalog, that could be a misnomer. The Messier list that I refer to was published along about 1780. The New General Catalog is newer. That came out in the 1800s. But these men did such great work. We're still using these lists today. So I find this just remarkable what they did with the equipment they had at the time. Now, continuing a little bit further north, just over Perseus, we have Cassiopeia, which looks like a giant W in the sky. And right in the middle of that W, there's one of my favorite objects that I love to show at star clusters, another NGC object called NGC 457. And I tell people, remember that because 457 isn't a gun. That is what we also refer to as the ET cluster, because if you look at it in low magnification, it looks like a stick figure looking back at you that we call ET. Kids and adults love that little open cluster. Or actually, what you call, I'll make you sound smart, what you call stars that happen to look like something is an asterism. That's all that means. Stars look like something. It's an asterism. The Big Dipper is actually an asterism. It's part of a much larger constellation, the Great Bear. So you can sound smart to people and point out these asterisms. Remember that. That's my word of the day. Now, if we go back around, I wanted to touch, as long as I said Cassiopeia, there's another controversy among astronomers in how you pronounce some of these names. I've heard them pronounced Cassiopeia, Cassiopeia, and others. Let me tell you something. Even the pronunciation guides that I have do not agree. There's two pronunciations for Betelgeuse. We're told we're supposed to be saying Betelgeuse. So therefore, however you want to pronounce one of these star names, I'm not going to argue with you because even the experts can't agree. And anybody that wants to argue with them should get a life. Now to go back around to the eastern part of the sky, actually south more to southwest now, the other side of Orion, we have Taurus de Bull. Now that could be identified, there's what's called the Hyades, which looks like a big V in the sky. And there's a bright red star in there. That's Aldebaran. That is actually the eye of the bull. And in that same vicinity, and actually considered part of Taurus, is something you can see with your unaided eye. If you look up, it just looks like kind of a fuzzy patch. And if you really stare at it, you can actually make out some of the stars in it. It's called the Pleiades, or the Seven Sisters. We know it as M45. Now, people with good eyes, and that's not me, you make out about 6 stars in this cluster. If you put a telescope or binoculars on it, you see a whole lot more stars, and these stars are all surrounded by clouds. That's not your bad optics. That is what we call nebulosity. There's gas up there in this cluster. That's a nice thing to look at, and that's well placed this time of year. Another question I get, how the hell do you know where this stuff is? Well, it's what I do. But the answer is simple. Here's a guide. This comes every month in Astronomy magazine. There's also Sky and Telescope magazine, and these star charts tell you where you're going to find stuff throughout that month. And it'll point out highlights, things that are going to happen that you want to look at. So I rely on these to help me find information. And I also spend time outside so I know what's going to be right about where. So I know where to look for it. And that's why I encourage you to come out Saturday night, if we can, and I can help you navigate through some of this and then teach you to find your way around the night sky. And let's get to our evaluators now, if we can. Evaluator number 1 is Tracy. So Tracy, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, and thank you, Thomas, for giving us such a great speech today. The title of this speech was Buy Now. So what's Thomas selling now? He's selling 4 techniques in procrastination and excuses. And it was a very humorous speech. He had some really good things that happened in his speech. His imitations were fantastic. I loved watching the different people and his voices when he was going through his speech. He had wonderful props with his hat and the broom, and his gestures were fantastic also. Him burning off calories, leaning on the wall, and all of these exercises. I have to say, I think big tech should ban Thomas for it because I don't want anybody I know buying his products. And also he threw in a lot of humor. Every time he said, put on your mask, put on your mask. All I could think of is that's what I have to say to myself every day too, because I'm constantly forgetting it. So it was a great reminder. There's a couple of things that he could have done to improve it. There was a lot of transitions in the speech when he was going from person to person, and all I could see was the camera spinning around and so forth. And that was a little bit confusing. And I totally understand that you're a one-man band trying to make these transitions. So it's difficult to have clear, crisp transitions and that. So it's something to work on in the next speech if you had somebody else helping you film it, but I understand that it's difficult to do. And it's also in the constellations that Thomas is talking about procrastination and excuses. And it's not his fault. I understand he is in the first responder working in a hospital, so it's very difficult in time, and I get that. I think it's also the evaluator's job to find out what the evaluation entails and the speech titles, the so forth. But when you email them and you don't get it, and at the 2 seconds before his speech came out, he gave it to me. So I was on pins and needles, and that was his procrastination. So he truly believes in his product, I can tell you that. If he was going to bring the speech over the top, he needed to give us his website information. How can we buy it? What's the phone number? And throw in a deal like, if you're the first 30 buyers of this, you can get 2 for the price of 1, or you get 30% off. Otherwise, this was a great speech, and I'm glad that you did it the second time. It's humorous, it's fun, and I love seeing some of those. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you. Our second evaluator of the day is Carol Ann, evaluating Katie. Carol?
Well, Katie certainly gave us quite an interesting speech, especially those of us who are coffee drinkers. And it was very well researched. I had no idea all that went through prior to this Keurig being developed. And she was became very familiar with the subject, and also included in it was the fact that these big companies were involved in a lot of negotiations before this was settled. The only thing she didn't make eye contact much. Of course, she had an awful lot of information that she did have to read, because she couldn't have remembered all those facts, but she just didn't make eye contact hardly at all. The one goal of this type of speech is it can be informational, and she certainly qualified in including a lot of information for us. Now, I use the Keurig, I use the disposable ones, and she explained how much plastic waste is involved in that. And I know my granddaughter has gotten one of the reusable ones, and she, it was good that in her speech that she gave us information on more environmentally friendly ways of using these single cup devices. But it was very just so informative and interesting, and we really enjoyed it. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. Our third and final evaluator today will be Jackie Kenny, evaluating Jen Czapla. Jackie?
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. We heard a lot from Jen this morning, and She presented it well. She used some modest gestures. She told us that we need to identify what our problems are in communicating and use our Toastmaster skills to improve, whether it's in our life or our job. Our relationships are important and they deserve our attention. The theme of the day seems to be procrastination. And I think Jen might have procrastinated a little bit getting ready for this speech. The delivery might have been smoother if you had rehearsed a little bit more. But I found a lot of use of your Toastmaster skills. You have a wonderful vocabulary. You brought us a lot to think about in your speech. And I loved the fact that you consider Toastmasters to be me time and not something to apply as much to your work life as to be a place where you enjoy your time that you spend with us. I enjoyed the whole theme of your speech and the way that you brought it forward. Procrastination is the bane of the existence of a lot of people and something that's very difficult to overcome. And I do think we can use Toastmasters to improve our, what shall we say, our forward thinking about procrastination and trying to conquer it. So I think you don't need to be so hard on yourself, Jen. You may be failing to meet all of your expectations, but I don't think you're falling short in many areas. You've accomplished a lot since you joined our club in 2013. And I look forward to watching you keep on flying. Thank you for this morning's speech, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. Can we get a timer's report for our evaluators?
Certainly, Mr. Toastmaster. Pleased to report all three of the evaluators qualified. Tracy at 3:06, Carol Ann at 2:33, and Jackie at 2:56.
Okay. I hope I've whetted your appetite this morning to get you interested enough to take a walk outside this time of year to have a look up and see what's in our night sky. And I certainly invite you to come out Saturday, weather permitting, to let me show you some of the wonders of the night sky. And even if you just go out and look around with a pair of binoculars, some people look down their nose at those. They're a great tool to help you look at what's up there. I think I've touched upon some of the high points. And I did miss one object. Further, as I was going east away from Orion, and I went through the big and the large dog, Ursa, major and minor. You keep going east. There's another one of our wonderful Messier objects over there that's visible this time of year in a well place. It's M44. We call that the Beehive cluster. That is an open cluster with a lot of little stars in there that you only see with magnification. Some people like to go out with binoculars. I've done it and see how many of these objects you can actually see, even though you can't see a lot of detail, to actually say that's what I'm looking at. Now, the problem is, you know it's there. Is your mind playing tricks on you? Because you know it should be right there. Are you seeing it, or is it just your mind seeing it? That's where the fun comes in. So I encourage you all to come out and enjoy all the wonders of the night sky with us. And I hope, I do not know, as another side note here, I was in a board meeting with my astronomy group last night, and they're pretty much killed the whole season for official BAA star shows. They're scared to death of all of this. So that's not real encouraging to me. Yeah, I hear you laughing. I agree. What? Oh, Phil wants to say something? Go ahead.
Steve,
Oh,
if we go Saturday night, are you astronomers going to be able to tell us the future?
No, you're confusing.
Just to be a wise guy.
Yeah, you're confusing your sizes. That is an astrologer. They're the ones that attempt to predict the future. It is not science. It's a pseudoscience. Actually, originally, astronomy and astrology were the same study. Just at some point, some of us broke off to study the actual movement, and other people went off to smoke something funny and put meetings in these groupings of the stars. Because people have a need to know the future, so they invented this whole thing of astrology. As I like to say, you can tell us apart easy. Astronomers deal in facts. Astrologers, I don't know what they're doing, but I'm not going to poo-poo it. You know, if you want to follow that, go ahead. Try and prove me wrong.
Steve, I always like listening to you because I always learn something. It's amazing, and I like to hear the difference between the two. You explain it so well.
Thank you. Because some of our fellow astronomers really get upset. The first star show I ever did, I had them posted on our big village sign down here, and they inadvertently wrote astrology night. Some of my fellow astronomers wanted me to go rip them a new one because they thought that was so terrible. I said, so what? It gets people's interest. I don't make the big deal of it. Some of my other astronomers do, because I don't think it's worth hollering about. I got more important things to worry about.
Except for Phil.
Well, except for Phil, who loves to get in my shorts about this. So I think now I will turn it over to our general evaluator, Mr. Dave Licata. How'd I do, Dave?
All right, I'm unmuted. I'd like to point out at the beginning of my general evaluation that Steve will be calling on the report because I wasn't clever enough to print out an agenda. I'd like to apologize for that, but Toastmasters don't apologize. You got that? All right. We're going to start with Tracy Farrell. Tracy's camera work today was better than in the past. Her camera work was always pretty good, but it was better today. And she did point out the fact that the speaker's camera work was making us seasick. And I did make a note to see if she would do that, and indeed she did. And she also shared with the speaker, Tom, how many opportunities he had for improvement next time. So I thought Tracy did a very nice job. Carol immediately came to the forefront and praised Kate for her research and Kate's capacity to share that information with us. I thought Carol went off the rails a little bit when she started mentioning her granddaughter, and I'm sure she wanted to go into the environment and to be environment friendly because I'm sure her granddaughter, being in that generation, is very conscious of that, and that's always a good thing. And I thought Carol was a little bit light on banging that gong for improvement, but she's a new Toastmaster, and new Toastmasters, they get a little bit shy about offering improvements, but don't be shy, because this is how you grow, and this is how we all grow. That brings us to Jackie. Jackie's camera angle today was also, like I said, it's always good, but it was better today. And your lighting was terrific. We had no problem discerning you, and there was no distractions. That's the word I'm looking for. When you focus and get in the camera like you should, it lessens the distractions and makes for a more powerful sharing of information. She was quick to point out Jen's lack of rehearsal. So welcome to my world, Jen, because Jackie always gets that on me as well. She did a little double clutching on her sandwich where she said what she liked, what could be improved, and what she loved. And then she kind of went back to where there was more room for improvement. So her sandwich was okay with a double clutch. And now we get to the Toastmaster du jour, my dear friend Steve. Steve, your camera work today was much better. I want to salute you because we know that you're not in love with this whole Zoom thing, and we know that you're not that fond of computers, but you took some strides today. That was great. You were much more centered in the camera than usual. Now I'm going to share this with all the Toastmasters. I've been in forever, since '82. And people constantly ask me, well, I don't know what to talk about. I don't know what I'm going to say in my speech, and I don't know what I'm going to say as Toastmaster. Well, Steve's big ringing lesson this morning was loud and clear, talk about what you know. And my friend Steve knows the night skies. And I appreciate all the information you shared with us. I thought it was terrific. And I'm very fond. I've owned a couple telescopes in my day. I subscribe to Sky and Telescope magazine, and I enjoy the charts, but I never stick with it, and I never follow through. But with Steve constantly reminding me what a great opportunity this is, because you know what? We do have a nice skyscape here in Western New York, and we have a nice, beautiful sky, and if you look out over the lake, you even get more sky. So that's a good thing. Now, I just had to take a tiny issue with Steve. Steve was talking about the content of the speech after the speaker spoke. You have to, as Toastmaster, you have to refrain from making comments on what the speaker said because there's a small chance that that might influence the vote. Plus, Steve, I don't know if you have my phone number or not, but if you have any questions about coffee, just call me, all right? So this morning was important because we did learn so much. And I'm taking away the fact that Kate has given me enough information and enough ideas and enough inspiration that I have about 3 speeches now. And I'm sure I'm going to do a speech called Keurig. Why don't you just melt the brown crayon in hot water? That's the end of my report, Steve, and thank you.
Thank you, Dave. One other thing I want to make mention of here before we launch into the reports, and Dave kind of touched on it. A lot of times people will see something in the sky and they'll ask me to tell them what they saw. I love doing this. I only need 2 pieces of information to help me zero in on it. What time were you looking? And what direction were you looking? What part of the sky? And usually from that, I can discern by their descriptions what it was they saw. Now, I love playing detective like this. Sometimes it's not easy. I found certain times they'd seen satellites, what we call iridium flares, or different objects like this. And I really have to piece it together with now. Sometimes I got to do some research to see what they found. But with those 2 pieces of information, I will find out what you saw. So let's get into our reports of the day. We'll save word master like we always do. Let's start with our Master, Mike Licata. How do we do for Oz?
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our guests this morning. Many strong speakers. Sylvia, I caught you said cause. It was because, and you had 1 Larry Eggert had 2. Thomas had 3, but I believe they were intentional. I caught Kate with 1. Carol had more than 4. Jackie had 1, and then she had 1 restart. And that is my report for this morning. Thank you.
Next up is our grammarian, Marty Johnson. How was our grammar today?
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. I did hear a number of constellations of very good grammar during our presentations this morning. I'd like to start with the Toastmaster of the day, Steve Smith.
I like the phrase when Steve said, let's take a figurative walk outside. And I like the term you said, Steve, asterisms. And Larry Eggert, I liked when you said that you had a nice phrase in grammar. It said, to be the only person on the planet, Mars would be very exciting. To be on Mars all by yourself. Marc Campos, gazed at the stars, pondered the mysteries. During Kate's very interesting presentation on K-Cups, and I can definitely attest to what must be a horrible look in the landfills, because I know where I work at Tops, there's probably at least a 12 to 16 foot section of whatever brand, whatever company you can think of, they make a K-Cup, and I'm sure they all end up where Kate said. I like the phrase when Kate said, we won't dive into that today. Sometimes I hear the phrase won't or the word won't, and I use it myself. I would suggest saying we will not dive into that today. And I like the phrase Kate said, I implore you. Jen had an interesting phrase. She said, implementing and executing the plan. Tracy, clear and crisp transitions when she was speaking of Tom's Heldwian's presentation. And I like Carol, you reiterated Kate's description of the waste created by the K-Cups. I didn't hear any other grammar that needed tweaking. Everyone had their good grammar hats on and their good English tongue today. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity today. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. Next up is our tech and gesture master, Jill, and I'll mute myself.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. I have several things that I saw on both lines today, although many of them got brought up during the evaluations. So I won't reiterate on those ones. As far as tech goes, it was nice to see many of us wearing Buffalo Bills or having Buffalo Bills backgrounds, because we're all rooting for the game on Sunday and hoping that we have a big game to root for in a couple weeks from now. Several people also put up backgrounds of astronomy themes, which that was nice. Now, let's see. Steve leaned into the camera whenever he was trying to make a point, which he does that in talking anyhow. Katie did a good job holding up her K-Cups and being the Vanna White thing. What I saw was, now Tom, when he portrayed Joey was bad. He had Thomas Heldwine's hard hat, which I don't know if anybody else saw that, but he did. And that's just not, somebody's doing something funny there. And the other thing that I saw in Tom's speech, which it was brought up about the craziness of him moving the camera around, is in some ways that disjointed video worked with the silliness and stupidity of somebody buying his whatever it is product that he's trying to sell. That is my report, Mr. Toastmaster.
Okay. Thank you. Now we get to the fun part. See if anyone's been paying attention. Our quizmaster, Beth Banks. Test us.
And good morning. Yes, we had some very interesting speeches today. And our Toastmaster also gave me my first question. Where did Steve invite us to go to start the meeting?
Our show, Margin Manor.
Yeah, Margin Manor, Saturday night.
Yes, and
Outside.
also what else? Yes.
Oh,
Where
to the
else?
Star Show. Mike Licata's bartending, mulled wine.
Oh. Hey, that's good. Get some more double stars.
Outside and look up. That's where he invited us to go. Where does Larry Eggert want to go in space?
Mars.
Mars.
Who was Thomas's first character? Tall guy.
Thomas.
Oh, Thomas. Who was the coffee wars between?
Many folks.
There's so many.
So many.
Starbucks, Heinz Kraft Heinz.
Kraft Heinz and
Starbucks.
yes, Starbucks. And
That's what
last
I
one.
said.
What was Jen's loop between? I don't know. Oh, I got you. Avoidance and procrastination. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster.
And finally, we get to the word of the day. Dr. Stevens, how did Constellation do?
Constellation did okay. They had 4 people use it: Steve, Kate, Jackie, and Marty in the second half. And I would like to say that we should have our own constellation and Lockport Constellation, because we are all stars of Toastmasters. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. And now I'll turn this back over to our president to talk to our guests and close out the meeting. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. I was hoping to hear some movie jokes like Spaceballs, like Planet Duidia, or the Starship Enterprise, or Star Wars themes, but I digress. I also put in the chat too the song Venus by Bananarama, the 80s song.
I was hoping for Barbarella.
Ah, yeah.
May I ask, what is Barbarella?
You're too young.
Okay. Someone can explain to me later after the meeting.
Post toasties.
Yes, all right.
Look it up.
Before things get too much. Yeah.
Moving on.
All right. Our guest, Linda Marie Brown, she is the VP of membership for Speakeasy Club in Orchard Park. I know she's still on, but she's at work. But they meet the first and third Monday night at 7 p.m. if anybody would like to join their meeting. And Deb Bronshaw, she is one of our dear friends from the Celtic Fest and Wine Fest. So she was on to hear our speeches this morning. So we thank her for jumping on. And I would like to go on to our winners today. Our best table topics winner is Phil Russell. Our best evaluator today was Tracy Farrell. I know Tracy had to leave, but Tracy is our evaluator, our best evaluator today. And our best speaker of the day is Jen Czapla. Now, and thank you, Kate, for telling me. I would like to propose a toast since we didn't have a toast. Here's to our solar system. May it flourish with every sparkle of light. Are there any?
What's your announcement? What's your announcement, you tease?
My announcement? Oh, I was going to mention it tomorrow, but since you're pulling my leg, Dave, I'll explain. Trust the process. Okay. I was going to save it for tomorrow, but since Dave's pulling my leg, Since I am an employee of Canisius College, it gives me great pleasure that I will be returning to school for the fall semester at Canisius College. So thank you, Dave, for telling me that. But all right, so that was my big news. I was gonna save it for tomorrow, but I guess today would be a good.
Thank God, I thought you were gonna say you were engaged or something.
Oh God, no.
We got a sneak peek of his big announcement here at the meeting. Oh.
Dave, I'm not married.
Great meeting today, guys. Great meeting. We could wrap it up. It's 8:30.
Yeah, Post Toasties up next. Club officer meeting is up next. So I wish everybody a happy weekend. See you guys next week. Thank you so much.